On December 14th, 2021, YouTube celebrated the milestone of a cumulative 1 trillion views on Minecraft-related videos. This averages out to a staggering 150 videos received by every single person on Earth. Over the more than a decade since Minecraft's official release, thousands upon thousands of individuals have dipped their toes into the ocean of Minecraft YouTube content, producing Let's Plays, music videos, animations, speedruns, and countless more genres of video. Creators such as Captain Sparkles, Yogscast, Sky Does Minecraft, LD Shadow Lady, and, most recently, Dream and the rest of his SMP have stood as Goliaths of the community, producing hundreds of hours of content and incurring billions of total views each. But out of that endless abyssal ocean of content, out of every last video filmed, uploaded, and released out into the depths, none quite match the raw, breathtaking agony that is Peanut Butter Gamer's hardcore series. Peanut Butter Gamer, also known by a variety of other names including PBG, Peeves, and his real name, Austin Hargrave, is a fairly well-known YouTuber who's accrued a respectable 2 million subscribers in the 13 or so years he's been in the business. In truth, he's quite an unlikely source for a Minecraft-based series such as Hardcore. He mainly produces comedic, review-style videos, or on his now-defunct second channel, minimally edited Let's Plays. And he's not a Minecraft YouTuber in any sense of the word. His main channel boasts a meager 4 Minecraft-related videos, only one of which was released within the past decade. Rather, he's known best for his hacking videos, his Zelda Month content, his love for Arthur, and perhaps for even being the co-creator of gaming YouTuber content hub Normal Boots. Truly, Hardcore stands very much alone, vastly unlike anything else he has ever made. The idea for the Hardcore series was developed sometime in the late 2000s by PBG as well as his older brother Stuart, better known as McJones, while the two were working as night janitors in a local school. Combining their interest in the reality TV show Survivor and their desire to see genuine stakes and tension in video games, the brothers devised a unique concept for a series. A multiplayer Minecraft Let's Play in which death was treated as both real and permanent. Anyone who died would immediately leave both the game as well as the Skype call they were in with the other players. One moment they could be chatting away with their friends, and the next, gone without a trace, their voice and presence both torn from the world in an instant. On the surface, this idea doesn't seem radically different than anything that's already been done. After all, at the time, Minecraft itself already offered a hardcore turn-the-death game mode, and hardcore survival continues to be a popular Let's Play challenge into the present day. Furthermore, it's hard to imagine that Minecraft, as a format, could ever induce genuine feelings of physical danger and grief over lost friends. It's just a game, after all. No one is really dead. But, as unlikely as it may seem from the outside looking in, PBG Hardcore manages to accomplish all of this and more. Somehow, through its blunt, unflinching, authentic execution, it acts as a conduit of humanity, a window into the very hearts of those who play a part in it. We contend that hardcore is best understood as a collection of people who are not acting, but are actually trying their best with everything they have to give. And if you look closely, you can see where the little bits of each of their souls are etched into the folds of the show, frozen in time. Now, if you'll lend us your ear, allow us to tell you the story of PBG Hardcore. The very first episode of Hardcore was released on July 23, 2012, exactly 10 years ago as of the day this video was uploaded. However, recording actually began all the way back on January 3rd of that same year. This was 10 days before the release of Minecraft 1.1, and at the time, one of the biggest newly added features was the End, an empty void of a world ruled over by silent obsidian pillars and the serpentine dragon who guarded them, representing the end of both the game and, perhaps, life itself. The defeat of this dragon was the ultimate goal that the very first season of Hardcore took up for itself. Together, PBG and McJones managed to scrounge up 5 other people to participate in their new show: JonTron, Barry Kramer, Gerard the Completionist, and also their 2 non-YouTuber friends, Dean and Soa, for a total cast of 7. The editing of the show, done by PBG himself, was designed to highlight each participant individually as much as possible. Multiple players recorded gameplay, and whose footage was being shown would change often during episodes, indicated through a camera symbol on the respective player's portrait. These portraits also reflected their in-game status, flashing red when that particular player was in danger, and going dark and being covered by an X upon death. Each episode also began with a small, TV-style introduction which showcased the character that each player had chosen for their Minecraft skin, and also if that player was dead. The cast-driven nature of Hardcore was immediately apparent. It was clear the show was designed to allow the viewer to connect with the players, to learn their faces and feel their emotions and see through their eyes. For PBG, JonTron, Gerard, and Barry, the show was a chance to see them outside of their natural habitat. And for McJones, Dean, and Soa, it was a chance to get to know them, to discover who they were, these outsiders who had somehow wound up on YouTube just the same. And for all 7 of them, it was a chance to see how they fared in the wild and how they learned to work with each other as the show progressed. The show was immediately well received, gaining nearly 25,000 views in just a few days, and a small but dedicated fan base quickly arose. In particular, Dean and McJones were the recipients of minor, unexpected popularity. McJones for how he was branded the Professor by his friends for the in-depth knowledge of game mechanics he possessed,
and put the rest of the Ender Pearls into the slots to open the End portal.
Dean, in contrast, for his complete and utter lack of knowledge of the game, as well as for his bubbly, excitable, and loud personality.
Oh my god, 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 oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
And both of them together for the odd yet wholesome friendship they cultivated, with McJones growing to act as Dean's quasi-mentor figure. In a twist on the usual story of internet fame, the two of them, despite having no platform of their own, came to be known just for being themselves. Of course, this inaugural attempt was undeniably scuffed. The cast was composed of a bunch of weird guy friends, none older than 24, just screwing around together.
Sesame Street, what's the word of the day? TV4.
Everyone had terrible Skype audio, and the episodes were riddled with people breathing loudly and coughing into their mics.
Oh!
Deaths were met with disappointment, of course, but few strong feelings of distress were ever expressed.
I'm falling!
Guys,
What is going on? I died.
Yet, the spark was there. The spark of what was to come. The spark of something so much bigger. As the 7 of them made their way through the world, talking and laughing, mining and crafting, fighting and dying off one by one by one by one. And at last, somehow, against all odds, winning. JonTron and Barry, just 2 final survivors. Behind that unpolished 2012 exterior lay a hidden strength, one that would begin to show itself more and more with each passing season. One that had already hooked them, long before they would ever realize what it was doing to them. PBG has an interesting relationship with his own show. Formally, he's the host. The show is located under his second channel and is branded under his name. He's the one who pulled its threads together, one half of the reason it even exists. And he's its first editor, the recruiter of every cast member, the welcomer of all to each new season. And yet, he's not the leader. He couldn't be the leader. He's flighty, easily distracted, often unsure as to what is even going on around him. He makes decisions blindly, on a whim, and often chooses very poorly in the process. Yet somehow, he always manages to evade the consequences of his actions. A heroic sort of karma Houdini, perhaps. But he couldn't possibly lead. He couldn't show others the way. And neither is he the main character of Hardcore. Over 10 years, he's only ever won a single season, and he's rarely the last man standing, even in the seasons they lose. In all honesty, he's a fairly mediocre member of Hardcore. Not terribly unskilled, but definitely not excellent either. Usually it's someone else entirely who survives to the end, carrying on completely without him, taking over his very own show on his very own channel. No, his true role is not to guide the others, and neither is it to sally forth all on his own. It's to act as the heart and soul of the team, the one who feels and hopes and loves with all he has inside of him. He's boyish, sunshiny, just a goofy little guy, always one to make jokes and cause problems that never fail to lighten the mood. He's a very friendly, charming person too. How else would he have gotten so many people to join hardcore over the years? And he works well alongside really anyone else in the show. Famously, he's the king of jinxing others, of brazenly tempting fate time and time again, no matter how often it goes badly for those around him.
Hey guys, this is me jinxing everybody.
And yet, at the very same time, he's often the one most devastated by the consequences he tempts into reality. His carefree, overconfident exterior, the self he projects in everything else that he creates besides hardcore, shatters to reveal his frail, shaken heart that longs to be protected from the ever-present clutches of mortality. Deaths hit him hard, so palpably, so agonizingly, be they others or his own, and so too does his demise strike others breathless as well. With the snuffing of his candle is the loss of his light, the loss of his beautiful voice and laughter and soul. And the world around the remaining survivors grows just that much darker. Because, after all, if even having your own name plastered upon the show can't protect you, how mortal are the rest of them? They could have stopped there. After all, Minecraft 1, their very first attempt, was a resounding success, the dragon vanquished with 2 players still left with their lives. But they didn't stop. It didn't matter to them that they had already reached the summit of that mountain, that they had already attained the greatest prize of all. Something about the show had taken hold of them, something about the tension and the stress underscoring every breath they took, something about the sensation of fighting their damnedest to cling to life. So, though they'd already won, though they'd already escaped, they chose of their own free will to return. Dean, JonTron, and Barry were immediately established as regulars on the show, alongside PBG and McJones, and the cast settled into a blend of recurring regular players and one-off guests. These were usually other well-known YouTubers in PBG's circle, such as Jeff Spacehamster, Pro Jared, Shane from Did You Know Gaming, and in one weird, now unlisted hardcore season, branded under Polaris rather than PBG, Markiplier.
Diablo 3, Reaper of Souls, hardcore.
Worth noting though is that despite not being YouTubers themselves, Dean, a then full-time law student, and McJones, an electrician specializing in patio screens, were never treated as lesser than the internet stars they played alongside. Hardcore was an equalizer, in a way. It didn't matter what your subscriber count was, death was coming for you all the same. Having succeeded at Minecraft for the time being, they decided to branch out into different games. First came DayZ Hardcore in late 2012, in a short, disastrous season that lasted only 3 episodes and is generally regarded as best forgotten. Then came Terraria Hardcore, in which 5 out of the 7 players died before even so much as thinking about the very first boss out of 4, and the remaining 2, PBG and Jeff, were both unceremoniously slaughtered by it. Later came Diablo 2 Hardcore, which wound up a surprising victory, with final survivors Gerard the Completionist and Paul for the Continue successfully slaying Diablo himself. But this win was bookended by 2 more Minecraft seasons, both with the goal of killing the newly added Wither boss, and both ending without a single survivor coming close to being able to spawn the boss in the first place. With their losses mounting, the tone of the show gradually began to shift. It became grittier and more sober. The panic set in easier, and the deaths hit harder. Jeff took over from PBG as editor, starting in Minecraft 3, and the improved post-production only made the episodes that much more intense. And though the real people behind the screen were obscured in face, Their voices alone were enough for us, the audience, to somehow feel what they felt. To feel their hearts pound and their palms grow clammy with primal fear. Something about the show brought out the truest parts of the players' humanity, along with their hunger to claim victory for themselves. Minecraft 2 was the first season to feature a last man standing, a single participant remaining, bearing the last flame of hope for an extended period of time. After everything, 20 episodes of watching his friends fall like dominoes, Theory was left in silence. What was once a lively group of 7 was now him and him alone. He ran through the endless red fog of the Nether with nothing but his own sword to talk to, nothing but himself to talk to, rambling on as desperation closed in. And when he died, it was without fanfare. He was slain without so much as a chance to defend himself. And just like that, their whole world was stripped of meaning. 20 episodes, 7 people, and what did it amount to? Nothing but the cold, ashen kiss of death. Back when they were still just newbies, they had begun, somehow, with triumph. But now, the more experienced they grew, the less and less attainable victory became. Barry, perhaps, is best described as a stagehand, or an ominos grise, if you will, one who remains largely out of sight, oft overlooked, yet is absolutely crucial to the inner workings of the world. Originally, Barry Kramer was, and perhaps still is, best known for being one of the editors of Game Grumps. He was not a host of the show, he was not center stage, but his presence pervaded all. The show would certainly not have been quite what it was in those days if not for his efforts and influence. This facet of his personality can be seen just as readily in hardcore. Barry is different from many of the others in that he is calm, quiet, and fairly reserved. He doesn't take up space like some of the louder, more outgoing participants do, namely PBG and Dean. And he's very even-tempered, able to roll with the punches and remain calm under pressure. This unusual composure has gained him the admiration of the others and led him to being characterized as the cool one. There's a reason his portraits depict him in slick black shades, after all. He's a pillar of the team, a dependable, indispensable player who can be fully entrusted with any task that needs to be done. And yet, this dependability of his is often taken for granted. In a show where your voice is your primary asset, your primary manner of communication with both your teammates and with the future audience, being quiet and low energy is directly to your detriment. Barry often has a difficult time talking over the louder personalities in the show, struggling to make himself known when not actively the center of attention. And in turn, the others often find themselves unintentionally overlooking him, at worst sometimes even failing to come to his aid when he desperately needs it. Because no matter how much of a lone wolf you are, no matter how competent and capable of working alone you are, one man without a team beside him is nothing. Nothing but a dead man walking, marching alone through the haze, onward towards his inevitable demise. The first season of MineZ Hardcore was an emotional whiplash. Up until that point, something about hardcore had remained persistently casual, even as they grew more determined to win, even as the tension grew thicker and the deaths weightier, even as the game itself grew to be less and less of just a game and transformed into something so much more to both them and us. Even then, something in it remained not quite entirely serious. But MineZ Hardcore, the 7th season of the show, was the point that everything crossed that line. There were many things in MineZ that differed from seasons prior. First, with it being set in a zombie apocalypse-based modded server, they had to deal with the added game mechanic of infection. Upon being attacked by a zombie, each cast member had a chance of contracting the zombie infection themselves. This sickness would then, unless cured, slowly but surely bring them down to half a heart, the point where any amount of damage, no matter how small, would kill them on the spot. This was unusual for them. Typically, in hardcore, each death comes suddenly, perhaps from a surprise creeper explosion or an unexpected trap. But this slow, steady decline to the very brink of demise, left hanging by the very skin of their teeth. This was new. And oh, how the disease ravaged them. First infecting Dean, then Dean again, PBG, and McJones. The three sick were left cowering in the shadows, terror audible in their voices, particularly in the case of Dean, whose typical, jubilant personality was dulled and darkened by the constant threat of death.
I'm at 1 heart. Please
Dean, I don't like
stand
this.
close to me.
And the four healthy were run ragged, scouring the dismal, labyrinthine caves of Sirius in vain hope of finding an antidote to cure their fallen friends. And all the while, their water and food and weapons ran low, and they themselves, too, were knocked closer and closer to death. And so, they decided to split up. They broke into two groups, the first consisting of the healthy, now including Dean, whose character was accidentally reset in a standard server reboot, and the second composed of the brothers, PBG and McJones, the two still wasting away. They bid each other a tentative goodbye, and they split to separate voice calls, and then the healthy left the sick behind, to the clutches of fate. Where their strength had once been found in numbers, here it became necessary to abandon one's fellow man to protect one's own life. First with PBG and McJones, down in the caves of Sirius, and then later with Dean, after he fell sick for his third and final time. And though they promised each time to return with healing supplies to save their wounded comrades, those words were destined to be hollow. Dean died all alone atop the shipwreck, unknown and unheard, with the tale of his demise untold. As for McJones and PBG, they fought tooth and nail, managing to escape Sirius with just a sliver of life each. But this victory was fleeting. McJones was slain like a dog that very night, in a town less than a kilometer away, denying his passing hope to at least die under the touch of sunlight.
If we even make it out of here and die in the sunlight, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
PBG, though, lingered. With just half a heart beating on inside of him, he outlasted every other person in the season, even the healthy, before tripping from the ledge and dying on impact. However, so the season wouldn't end on such an anticlimactic note, it was decided in post to rearrange the order of the deaths in the episodes themselves. Thus, the last man standing became the fourth to die. It was the first time that they played with the viewer's perception of the events that transpired, that it would not be the last. And though it would be years before they returned to the world of MineZ again, the gravity of the season, the unexpected, genuine weight that this mere game could hold, remained, threading through the very veins of every other season to follow. Over the years, there have been many manners of describing Dean, usually something along the lines of loud, hype, a noob, perhaps overbearing, occasionally a hazard, or even a polarizing figure, as he's termed in his official description. It is true that public opinion is largely split, but we would describe him as chronically misunderstood. Hardcore's fanbase has a way of pigeonholing the cast members, assigning roles to them, boiling down their most prominent traits into one or two descriptors. Barry became the cool guy, McJones the professor, and Dean the loud idiot. He is loud. We are not here to contest that part.
Oh man, Dean's trying to get me up there.
No, ah, shit! Blue people! Blue!
But the idiot part, that we take issue with. Quite literally, he's a lawyer and has been since 2016. It's true that most everyone familiar with the show already knows this fact, but we feel it's rarely granted the weight it deserves. He may not be the Phoenix Wright kind of lawyer like some people assume, but he's a businessman. And the businessy things he does are far beyond our comprehension, but just through following him on Twitter, you can tell that he's incredibly knowledgeable and enthusiastic about what he does. So, no, he's not an idiot. At least, no more of one than anyone else in the show. This reputation of his originates from the earlier seasons. Back then, Dean had a tendency to loudly and repeatedly ask basic questions.
How do you make a pickaxe? How do you make a pickaxe? How do you do a sword again? I don't know anything about this.
Okay, I got.
Wait, how did you already make all this stuff?
Produce over-the-top reactions to literally anything that happened.
Oh, God, it's nighttime! What the fuck? No!
And die suddenly and stupidly in completely preventable ways.
That was
He's dead.
His demeanor was grating to some, and the cast themselves often commented on it, poking fun at his overdramatic antics.
I love how Dean screams like it's the end of the world, but he has like full life and he's okay.
However, there is a simple explanation for why he acted this way. Much simpler than anyone's accusations that he was a stuck-up jackass or had a complex about not being famous. Rather, he just didn't know what was going on. Minecraft 1 was the first time he had ever played Minecraft, and he was trying to ask what to do. He was loud because he was almost perpetually ignored, treated like dead weight to the team.
Guys, I have hundreds of cobblestones.
That does literally nothing for us.
He repeated questions because they were never answered seriously.
Oh yeah, how do I make stuff?
There's no time to explain to you.
And he was unnecessarily terrified of everything because he just wanted to live.
I only have 2 feathers though.
Oh my god, oh my god!
It wasn't until he was paired off with McJones for a duo adventure, until the two of them stumbled into a mine shaft and had to rescue each other from Cave Spider Hell, that he was truly listened to for the first time. Because McJones, the patient teacher that he is, actually answered Dean's questions and placed trust in him despite his lack of experience, creating a special bond between them that would last for years. And this made all the difference. Within the span of just a few episodes, Dean's demeanor changed radically. As he said himself, his and McJones' mineshaft escapade was the first thing that truly clicked.
Yeah.
The journey we just had literally sold me on this game.
He stayed loud, of course, still that particular brand of 2012 hyper. But it was different.
What is that? What is that? What is that? Oh, it shot me in the face!
His frustration melted away, and he became much more confident, so much so that he wound up surviving to fight the final boss. It was a revelation. Like, oh, this is what it's about. This is what we're doing here. Why didn't anyone say so? The thing is, Dean's volume, his hype, his intensity isn't blind recklessness or intentional annoyance or a refusal to listen to the others. It never was. Quite the opposite, it's enthusiasm. As soon as he gained that confidence as a player, he turned around and immediately gave his everything to the show. It's clear that he cares so much about hardcore, that he wants to learn everything he can and pull his fair share of the weight. And he has plenty of his own to offer. He's good at strategizing, at looking at what's around them and communicating what they need to do.
Same path as we did last time, guys. Are y'all behind me?
He's also one of surprisingly few who exhibit the ability to learn from past mistakes. Sure, he's had stupid deaths, but literally every other member of the cast has too. And really, more than anyone else, he's the one who suffered most from the actions of others. Yet still, he's one of only 4 players to ever win twice, equal to Gerard, Jeff, and McJones. So why is this the reputation clinging to him, even as he develops as a player and as a person? One of burden. Why not, instead, what he provides to the team? His loyalty, his support, his enthusiasm, his authenticity is crucial to hardcore. It's why he lashes onto newbies each season, mentoring where he can and simply being there for support where he can't, hyping them up endlessly, seeing the value in them that they cannot, and simply listening to their questions and to everything they say, just as McJones did for him. Hardcore is a show predicated on the assumption that everyone will look out for one another, and there is perhaps no one better at fulfilling this requirement than Dean. Sure, he is a tryhard. He tries incredibly hard because he genuinely loves the show. He always has, and he still does, and he always will.
Here's a health to the company, and one to my lass. Let us drink and be merry, all out of one glass. Let us drink and be
merry. Terraria 2 was fast on the heels of MineZ, just a month and a half later, coming in with an immediately strong start. The growth the show had gone through since the last attempt at Terraria was undeniable. As players, they had all become much more confident and serious as they navigated the world of the game. No longer were these just a bunch of guy friends just shooting the shit together. They were warriors, soldiers, carefully planning out their adventures and negotiating their resources. It mattered to them if they won or not. All of them were hungry, starving for the taste of victory that, out of the 7 of them, only Barry had experienced. McJones was again at the helm of this season, with his boundless love and knowledge of the game. But this time, he stood strong beside someone else, Jeff, who had become a recurring guest by that point, and whose knowledge of the game rivaled McJones' own. Jeff's ability to easily hold his own allowed McJones to relax a little bit in his presence, letting his goofy inner self slip out in the moments of downtime the two shared.
I'm touching you inappropriately.
Stop it, stop it.
They hit a rough point around the middle of the season, when they lost 4 people in a very short time, 2 in 1 episode alone, even. But the remaining 3 survivors made a formidable trio. McJones, Jeff, and Proton John, who'd never played Terraria before, but was a fast learner, particularly with McJones and Jeff to guide him. Their team of 3 carried on through the world, slaying boss after boss without faltering, and soon enough, they were closing in on their final goal, the Wall of Flesh. And then John died in the midst of digging down to hell.
Oh shit! No!
It was a devastating loss, to be certain, but it wasn't insurmountable. After all, that still left Jeff and McJones, the 2 most experienced Terraria players by far. They were so close to victory, just 1 boss left. Surely they could do it, the 2 of them. And then Jeff died too.
Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Just minutes before the final fight, which left McJones alone. McJones, who was more than capable of killing the boss solo, if not for the residual shock of losing 2 people in the 11th hour. If not for the fact that health and resources had been spread dangerously thin. McJones, just a guy, a non-YouTuber, suddenly thrust into the spotlight alone for the very first time. And oh, he tried. He tried to carry it home. He put up a valiant fight against the wall, throwing at it everything he had to give. But it wasn't enough. With the boss down to just 350 HP out of a total 8,000, he was killed, able to do nothing but watch it glide past his own broken remains. The perfect season, the perfect team, everything lined up so perfectly before them. Gone. Destroyed. Torn to pieces by just 350 health. The barest line of separation between victory and death. The bitterest, closest loss they'd ever had. Afterwards came Minecraft 4. Though they hadn't gotten any closer to slaying their old foe, the Wither, they elected to shelve that boss for the time being and instead turn their attention to the Elder Guardians, added in the most recent update 1.8. Just as with Terraria 2, the season started off well. They had only 6 players this time, and only 1 guest, Kid Icarus, as Jeff had finally been promoted to the status of main cast member. But they weren't quite as foolish as they had once been. The days of early deaths seemed to be long over, and they were more than able to make up for that missing person, establishing themselves and getting everyone geared up for the journey ahead. And then came the Nether and the Pigmen. Pigmen had long since been a tricky enemy in that it required complete cooperation from everyone to avoid them. If a single person attacked a single pigman, then all of them would soar on all of them. And that's exactly what happened. Twice. First, it was McJones's doing, which led to the abrupt and violent death of Barry. And then it was Caddy's, who cemented his own grisly fate.
Oh my god! Oh, I'm so sorry, I panicked.
And that left 4. A merry group of 4, with still a long way yet to go. But unlike Terraria 2, there were no freak accidents leading up to the final challenge. The 4 of them brewed their potions and suited up in their armor and boarded their boats and at last casted off in search of an ocean monument.
I found something.
Oh, that's it!
I see it!
And though the final battle was fearsome, though they inched ever closer to panic as they drifted through the maze-like interior of the monument, though at one point they even had to give up, return home and brew more potions, they did it.
Yes! Yes! We did it!
By some miracle, they did it, taking home the most wondrous triumph they had ever had. 4 people. 4 men, the 9th season and the first time any of them had tasted victory. And yet, unbeknownst to them, they came so close to having it be ripped away from them before even setting foot in the monument. At one point, under assault from the Guardians all around them, they built a shelter. They piled in on top of one another into a claustrophobic space that was only 1 block wide and 3 long, leaving only 2 blocks of room at the end for an exit. Which was an incredibly dangerous move, for they were all afflicted with mining fatigue, weakness rendered upon them by the Guardians themselves. With Mining Fatigue 3, it takes 370 times longer to mine a block, and it takes an additional 5 times longer to mine underwater. So, in total, it would have required 15 straight minutes of mining to break 1 block, far longer than the sum of their remaining water-breathing potions. And yet they built with such carelessness, 3 of them acknowledging their situation only in passing, and the 4th, PBG, visibly failing to understand at all that every block they put down was as good as permanent. If they had placed even a single block more, be it unknowingly or by misclick, into that 2x1 hole, they would have been trapped. And God, can you imagine? It would have been the darkest ending to a hardcore season by far, and yet nobody seems to realize how narrowly they avoided it. How it could have been the 4 of them, mining desperately at the walls of the prison of their own creation, wondering why it won't break. The realization that they're trapped would settle in one by one by one by one. The realization that their water-breathing potions are finite, that they have precious little time to think and 0 room for error. What would they have felt? Anger? Defiance? Or mere acceptance? It would have destroyed all 4 of them, but especially McJones. Poor little McJones, to be fresh off of Terraria 2, denied so close to victory, and have the same thing happen again, but so much worse. Maybe they could have escaped. It's not likely, but maybe. If they had been strategic with their potions, and the person mining held steady for 15 real-life minutes, maybe 1 or 2 of them could have lived. But only 1 or 2, not 4. Which may have been a fate worse than death, because they would have had to decide, somehow, who should be condemned to die, and who should be condemned to live, watching helplessly as their companions drown right in front of them. What does it matter? After all, they didn't trap themselves. They placed a door in the gap instead of a block, and went on to slay the Guardians. Just 1 click. the barest line of separation between victory and death. McJones is perhaps the strangest person to ever appear in hardcore. This is partially because we, the audience, know almost nothing about him beyond the show. A few pieces of his real life can be gleaned here and there, that he's left-handed, that he's good at working with electronics, that he owns a lot of pets. But compared to the YouTubers he shares the stage with, and even compared to the non-YouTuber yet eternally online Dean, his offline life remains largely an enigma. He has virtually zero presence on the internet beyond hardcore, with his few social media accounts all growing cobwebs at this point. There are hardly even any pictures of him floating around that are under a decade old. But yet, through the lens of hardcore, we can still somehow cobble together a vague concept of who this man is as a person. As with Dean, McJones has been strongly typecast in hardcore. He's seen only as the professor, the one around to just info dump whenever necessary. And, to be fair, he dons this role well. He's thoughtful, knowledgeable, and not particularly prone to antics. And he's more than willing to help out anyone who needs a teacher's guidance. But you'd be remiss to believe that's all he is, just a walking encyclopedia. There are so many more facets of his personality, of who he is, that come through in the show. For starters, he's a mentor, certainly, but he's too quiet and reserved and blunt to be a leader. He's kind and steadfast and protective, his watchful eyes ensuring no one is ever left behind. Yet he's hopeless when it comes to offering comfort in times of grief.
Give us little words of encouragement.
We can do it without him.
He cautions the others to heed his advice, yet he's nowhere near arrogant, brushing away every deserved compliment with an almost startling lack of self-esteem.
Oh, there you go. God, you're smart.
I've played so many hours of this game.
He's brusque and rough around the edges, yet he has this gentle, melodic speaking voice and a fairy-like giggle of a laugh.
Absolutely killed him.
Antibiotics!
Oh, right.
I got antibiotics!
He never curses or takes God's name in vain, except sometimes he does, and it's always well aimed.
And I'll give you this one. Oh, piss.
He's private, distant, keeping his own life to himself, yet he goes out of his way to be sweet and gracious to his fans. He acts normal, truly normal on the surface, yet on occasion he'll bust out with the most insane person utterances you could ever imagine.
I used to salt my wounds on purpose in high school.
He's self-contradictory. Nothing about him adds up quite the way you'd expect. But most of all, he hardly ever displays strong emotions. While there are many mannerisms that he and PBG share, their laughs, their speech patterns, their doty smiles, their way of coping with stress isn't one of them, at least not outwardly. Where PBG is fairly comfortable making himself vulnerable and tends to be loud and weepy about his emotions, McJones is private and closed off. Yet he still has his limits. There are times when his steady stoicism fractures. And if you peer down through the cracks, what you'll find is something feisty inside of him, stuck deep in his core. A roiling sort of frustration that only seeps out in his very worst moments. And this, truly, is what breaks him. Because when McJones gets frustrated, it seems that something in him snaps. He turns reckless, rash, violent, shutting down like a door slamming shut, going blind with anger, turned back inwards. And it is an inward sort of anger. You'd never ever see him genuinely lash out at anyone else in hardcore, no matter what. And so we come away from him with the sense that there's a little something more going on inside his head. A tempest that we're just not privy to, strangers as we are. Just another part of his enigma, perhaps. In all, McJones is a legendary figure. Perhaps a tragic hero, even. What made him great was also his own undoing. There was no one who shined quite like him, with his voice and his smile and his laughter, and equally there was no one who burned to ash quite like he did when it all went wrong. He was fated to be a firework, beautiful yet ephemeral, blooming brilliantly across the canvas of the sky, yet vanishing just as quickly into the wind. And yet still, we stare up into the smoky heavens and hope to see the light one more time. And then came a nearly 2-year hiatus from May of 2015 to December 2016. During that time, 2 major things occurred. The first was that the cast portraits were completely redone. Rather than continuing to use goofy, poorly cut out, real-life headshots of the cast members, PBG commissioned high-quality art assets from the artist Crooked Glasses. These assets contained both a standard portrait and a death portrait for every cast member, replacing the cheesy-looking red X that used to signify death up until that point. And the second was that PBG hired a new editor, a man named Todd Cameron, who single-handedly overhauled the entire show, bringing it to incredible new heights of intensity. Todd put an immense amount of time and care into his editing, tailoring even the smallest of details to craft the perfect mood. He added in visual gags, made use of spectator mode to offer third-person cinematic shots, and added 2 ever-burning torches to either side of the video layout, whose flames would grow and fall to match the energy playing out on screen. But the most distinct aspect of Todd's editing style was his use of audio to build tension. It was so masterful that even a mere shift in tone of the music was enough to put the viewer on edge.
Easy to escape.
Okay, so it just drops right here, so...
And when disaster did fall, it was matched with a gut-wrenching audio sting, like the strike of a heartbeat.
2 guns behind! I have 2 health! 2 health!
As these edits were done in post, they were made for the audience alone, made to drag us into the action, to make it seem as if we were right there beside them. Through this, watching the show became genuinely anxiety-inducing. We felt as if something of our own selves was at stake too. That something in ourselves would break right along with them. That it would kill us, too, to watch them die. Minecraft 5 benefited immensely from this new style of editing. It felt like a nightmare, a whirlwind, a tornado shredding through the land without so much as a moment to breathe. The players felt not fast, but not slow either, and each loss hit like a sledgehammer. First Barry, and second Pro Jared, and third Dean, and fourth and fifth McJones and Ray, one after another in a vicious 1-2 punch. And that left only 2.
PB and Jeff!
The friends, the buddies, the inseparable 2. Though they had lost everything besides each other, surely they could still do it. Surely, through the power of their friendship and unbreakable bond, they could...
Watch out! No!
And then, Jeff, alone. Jeff alone, journeying out towards the stronghold. Jeff alone, finding the portal and plunging through. Jeff alone, emerging into a world of nothing. One single man against an almighty dragon 100 times his size. The ending of this story has already long been written. It is only a matter of watching as Jeff inexorably marches forward to meet it. The editing might just convince you that at some point he had a chance. But just as it has ended every other time we've sung another verse of this song, there never was.
I gotta just like... Oh crap! Oh crap! Oh no! No!
It is incredibly, irreconcilably sad. And it is not an outcome that is foreign to hardcore. Many seasons in the past have ended just like this, but now, the reality is weightier than ever. For the first time, it is treated like the dramatic tragedy that it is. Not a futile, miserable last gasp, but a hard-fought struggle to avenge his fallen companions, to return home to them at last victorious. He walks alone, but we, the audience, are with him in spirit, as spectators, as ghosts, feeling every blow and every pound of his heartbeat. But we cannot help him, or do anything but watch as he inevitably suffocates. It's a sad song. It's an old tale from way back when. Still, we continue to sing it again and again. If anyone in hardcore was ever a true captain, it was Jeff. He holds within him all the traits needed to rise up as the show's most shining, most gallant of knights. He's charismatic, comforting, trustworthy, always patient and never demanding of more than the others can offer. Something in his bubbly voice and his cheerful demeanor make people listen to him and turn to him instinctively in times of duress.
Blazes, yeah, we got this.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
He has McJones' wisdom and Barry's aplomb and Dean's vitality and PBG's gentle heart. A piece of all his forebearers, the regulars established before him. But he's not just a warrior, of course. He also possesses an affinity for design and a love of pretty things. He's always the one to take charge of building and decorating and tending to the land, turning a plain stone hovel into something worthy of being called home. He's simultaneously their leader out on the battlefield and the warm, gentle guardian welcoming them back upon their return. He's just indispensable, the roots allowing the others to bloom. He holds them together, hugs them close, tries his absolute hardest to keep them prepared and not let them go astray. And yet, in all of this, he is still marred by a fatal flaw. His strength is not drawn from within, but from the soil of those around him. As much as he leads them, they are what give him purpose in the first place. And without their hands and arms and smiles to brace him, he simply folds, comes crumbling down to earth like a rose starved of the sun. Jeff the leader and Jeff the wanderer are very different people. And fate, it seems, enjoys playing with this. It wouldn't be any fun to just kill the knight outright, perhaps send a creeper or two his way. No, that would be a fate far too quick, far too honorable. No, it's much more fun to slowly but surely strip him of everything he loves, everything that ever brought him solace in this barren wasteland. To push him to the very brink until he breaks. To ensure that he's still capable, in theory, of winning alone, capable in his body, in his mind, of going through the motions, of swinging his sword, hack and slash until that filthy dragon is nothing but a midnight tatter of wings on the ground. Capable in body, yet not in heart, rendered weak and fragile and broken, pulled apart at the very seams. Out of what is now a total of 16 seasons of hardcore, they have only won 6 times. And not once in any of those 6 times has anyone won by themselves. No matter who you are, no matter how skilled or how level-headed or how good of a leader you are, one person can only do so much. Because a knight without his army is just a man. And a man could never slay a dragon. Never. Terraria 3 is the best season of hardcore. What makes it so perfect is simply everything. Everything from the cast, to the bonds they formed, to the jokes they made, to the obstacles they encountered, to how the deaths fell, and even to the way the now blooming fandom rejoiced around them. It is, we believe, the point where the show hit its absolute peak, the pinnacle of what it was capable of. Early on in the season, they broke into teams, a feature of the show that had now become commonplace. The first, nicknamed Team Blood, consisted of PBG, Jeff, returning guest Proton John, and new guest Luke Youngtown. And the second, nicknamed Team New Kids, consisted of Dean and other new guest Lucagen, with McJones affectionately referred to as their babysitter. Dean and Luca, in particular, were strikingly fast friends. The two shared a similar sense of humor and lack of knowledge towards the game, which laid the foundations for a bond that has persisted into the present. Together, the two of them were already entertaining enough, but adding in McJones truly turned Team New Kids into a Three Stooges-esque bizarre comedy. McJones was almost diametrically opposite his charges, with his reserved personality, confidence in the game, and ignorance of popular slang.
Get up there, McJones! Nice fucking Kobe!
Why did they send me in a group?
And yet they clung to him like lost puppies, screaming and crying and pleading whenever he did something even slightly risky, much to his immense amusement.
No, that's another hole to that's a hole to the shit vest!
I see it!
Somehow, though, it worked out. McJones was the brains of the operation, Dean was the backup, the moral support, and Luca, the newbie, was able to lean on both of them as she found her legs in the game. Even after the full group reunited once more, the three of them stuck together, resiliently weathering every challenge they faced. As for Team Blood, on the other hand, Proton John died first, alone in some dismal cave, crushed beneath the weight of a boulder. Jeff died second, at home, under a false sense of security, testing out his new grappling hook when it failed to connect. PBG died third, pure carelessness, brushing against molten meteor rock for just a hair too long. And that left all of Team New Kids intact, along with Luke, the other newbie of the season, and the last of his own team. It was at this point that the remaining four descended into the dungeon, a dark, sprawling labyrinth of a place, overrun with monsters and spikes and spaghettios galore. They combed through chest after chest after chest, fighting off monsters and pricking themselves on spikes, but found nothing of what they sought. As time wore on, they grew sweaty and overwrought and exhausted, wanting nothing more than to retreat to the safety of home. And frustration started to creep into McJones's demeanor. He started playing dangerously, making risky jumps and rushing ahead, leaving the others to fend for themselves. And with their brains scrambled and eyes grown weary, it was only natural that they'd eventually slip up.
Combine it with a obsidian.
Oh no!
So, they reached the final boss as three. McJones, the expert, and Luke and Luca, the novices. But McJones had already almost killed the wall by himself once. With three people, it was nothing, felled easily before them. And then, at last, a win in Terraria in their fourth victorious season overall. Except that's not quite what happened. They did indeed kill the wall, their victory was genuine, but their happy ending wasn't. They returned home not to a celebration of their achievements, but to a siege, the Goblin army. It must have descended upon their home sometime while they were below, lying in wait all along for their eventual return. And it would have been an easy fight if not for the fact that they had just killed the wall. If not for the fact that the slaying of the wall caused the army to instantly gain a new, much stronger type of enemy, one their feeble weapons could barely touch. They didn't stand a chance. After all they'd been through, blood and sweat and tears shed, after they'd given all they had to kill the wall of flesh, their reward was death.
I got the feather.
No!
It didn't matter at all that they'd accomplished their goal. They were rent limb from limb, just the same as their fallen brethren.
No!
Not even victory itself was enough to escape the jaws of their demise.
Well, that's a sucky way to end.
And then, they rounded the crown of the mountain and began to tumble down the other side. Up next came the second season of MineZ. Given how intense the first MineZ was, and also given that Todd's editing style would complement this, MineZ 2 was poised to be the darkest season of hardcore yet. But, surprisingly, the large majority of it wound up wholly lighthearted. The cast began already divided into teams and had to meet back up en route to their final destination, the floating islands. This small group setting brought out the best in their personalities and interactions, and, to boot, few moments of peril ever befell them. For nearly the entire season, there was only a single death: Dean, punished for an early moment of recklessness. And the rest were able to reconvene jovially without him, aside from McJones' moment of lament that he never even got to see Dean.
I care. I never even found him in game.
You never even got to talk to him.
Nonetheless, MineZ 2 felt oddly like a classic season, reminiscent of Minecraft 4 or Terraria 2 in the most familiar and delightful of ways. And then everything fell apart. They were exploring an abandoned town when another player suddenly appeared. A player with a Roblox skin and a meme username. Most likely just a child. But without warning, the entire cast turned on him, firing a volley of arrows at the player as he fled. He sent a few frantic chat messages insisting that he was friendly, but these went unheard. "Kill him," McJones said coldly, and lunged, giving the player no choice but to fight back. But this player, with full iron armor, grenades, and potions at his disposal, was far more powerful than just McJones trying to melee solo. Overcome by an inexplicable, silent rage, he fought frantically, blind to the massive damage the other player was inflicting upon him. And then, almost as soon as he finally realized, he was dead. The reason he and the others wanted this seemingly random kid dead wasn't revealed until much later. It seemed that PBG Hardcore had become too well known to avoid fan interference when playing on a public server like MineZ. Not only could any fan who encountered them in-game immediately know who had died and give out spoilers, but some fans even tried to meddle directly in the show. The player in question, a fan of theirs, had been stalking them in-game, insisting that they accept his gifts of high-level gear and loot. Despite their pleading for him to leave them alone, he continued to pester them through the majority of the season, until they were at their wits' end. And at last, McJones, grown frustrated and reckless, decided that the only way to get rid of the player was to kill him. They failed. With McJones dead and the player undeterred, the remaining cast members logged off and publicly declared the season cancelled in order to throw him off the trail. This ruse was successful in allowing them to finish recording, but the damage was irreversible. No one was happy with the season anymore, least of all McJones. And the journey itself ended in a bloodbath, with the remaining 5 players all perishing in quick succession in the 12th and final episode. As if McJones' death had flipped the entire season upside down, turned it from a merry band of brothers into a waking nightmare, doomed from the very start. It's also worth noting that, unbeknownst to the cast, a programming error had caused the chance of infection from zombies to be temporarily removed from the game. The primary threat of the previous MineZ season had been utterly non-existent all along. The world itself hardly posed a hazard to them at all. No, it was only themselves, their own choices, their own abilities, that had spelled their grisly end. This trend of disappointment was only to continue. The next season marked a return to going for the Wither. However, as this was the 6th overall season of Classic Minecraft, they determined it needed a little something more to make it stand out. Their choice? The Totem of Undying. It wouldn't be used directly, but rather as a sort of bartering tool. They would follow a quest to retrieve it, and then give it up in return for the revival of a dead cast member. To facilitate this, Todd himself stepped into the show for the first time, playing a character called the Wizard as he delivered them the quest.
At any point while you're at home, you will be allowed to activate it to bring back one person who has died.
Given that hardcore usually relied on the permanence of death, the introduction of revival was a surprising yet well-received twist. But the cast was in no hurry to jump into the quest. They still weren't certain if the wizard could even be trusted.
Did he just capture him?
I don't think I like how this is going.
Even more, as helpful as it could be, the quest would be a lengthy diversion from their main goal. And as history had shown, when it came to preparing for the Wither, they couldn't afford any distractions. And then McJones died. It was only the second episode. He was running through an already explored cave when he walked off a drop into lava.
Oh, Jet! McJones! Just happened! McJones! Just happened! McJones! What?
And the shockwave of it sent everyone reeling. The cast and the fans. For the man oft considered to be the most capable player to die the earliest anyone had ever died, in the most preventable of ways. Now they had a reason to seek the totem. So, after a while of preparation, they set out, 4 of them venturing off in search of the treasure, and 2 remaining at home to hold down the fort. Guided by the map given to them by the wizard Todd, they made their way to an underground temple located in the heart of the jungle, in which sat that fabled totem of resurrection. The very moment it was in their clutches, Todd waved a magic hand and teleported them back to spawn, not far from home. But it was night, and the land was awash in monsters, a final gauntlet to run before they could truly be safe. And in the process, Dodger, one of the season's guests, was killed by a creeper so close to home, to safety, that the explosion destroyed their front door. And suddenly, what was once a certainty now became a dilemma. 2 friends fallen, but only one allowed to return. But there was no debate. Not shown on screen, anyway. Instead, there was just Dean, declaring suddenly that he wanted Dodger back.
Alright, I have the idol, I'm bringing back Dodger.
Completely contradicting his earlier assertion that they needed McJones in order to win.
McJones fell. McJones, so we basically
so
lose.
Early.
And with the others clearly already in agreement, none of them ever offering any explanation to the audience as to how this choice was reached, it may as well have been that McJones just told them outright that he didn't even want to come back. We wouldn't know. Either way, this was a controversial decision, to put it mildly. Many were outraged that the cast would prioritize a newbie over a knowledgeable veteran, growing so hostile towards Dodger that both McJones and PBG had to publicly condemn them. This anger seems to be based in the notion that newbies drag the group down, a belief dispelled easily by Luca's excellent performance in Terraria 3. Yet, their disappointment was only fueled when, just 3 episodes after revival, Dodger died again, rendering the totem virtually meaningless. Indeed, unlike Luca, Dodger hadn't been properly taught. She didn't know to stand still to use another portal, which led to her sprinting through it and careening right off a cliff into lava. Perhaps a lesson can be found therein. A newbie is only as good as those who look after her. They did win Season 6, finally beating the Wither at last. But just like Terraria 3, it was a victory that felt reminiscent of a loss. McJones dead by episode 2, Dodger dead twice in 4 episodes, a twist that fell completely flat. We never even got to hear from Dodger, McJones, or Dean in the post-show podcast. The perspectives of the 3 people central to the season's main attraction were entirely lost to the wind. There was so much potential, but none of it had seen fruition. Something had just gone wrong. For For the first time in years, the cast decided to try out a new game, Starbound. For this season, Todd elected to announce the cast in a series of teaser tweets, revealing cast members, their newly redrawn portraits, and their descriptions in groups at a time. However, once 6 out of the 8-person cast had been revealed, fans began to take notice of something. Neither Dean nor McJones seemed to be present, despite being a beloved part of every other season. It was at this point that McJones saw fit to announce that he was retiring from hardcore. Though retired is perhaps a more correct word, because given that the season was only a month out from release, it was clear that it was very near completion. Which meant, in turn, that McJones had already known for quite some time that he wasn't coming back. Yet he never decided to mention it until directly acknowledged, as if he thought he could slip away into the shadows without anyone taking notice. Or caring. And even when asked directly, he said little, establishing only that he was definitely gone forever and wanted nothing to do with the show anymore. And he's made good on that promise. He hasn't spoken publicly about hardcore since mid-2018. Not once did he ever explain why he chose to leave or what made him so transparently upset. And neither did he ever mention if the nearly 7 years he spent on a show that he created ever meant a damn thing to him. You'd never even know, now, from the outside, that he was once involved with it. The best guess anyone has, even now, is that he just got fed up. Fed up with 3 immensely frustrating seasons, one after another, that soured everything in his mind beyond the point of no return. Fed up, and, as always, grown reckless, choosing the rash way out by quitting altogether. Or perhaps he just felt that the others had grown and moved on without him. That what he brought to the team now amounted to no more than just regurgitating a wiki page. He is the only one who knows the truth. We aren't privy to such matters. Whatever the reason, Starbound proceeded without him. And without Dean, but at least he was just busy with work, rather than quitting altogether. Starbound was an odd, distant sort of season. It's difficult to even find words to describe it. As in both MineZ seasons, they began already divided into 2 teams. But unlike MineZ, it took 12 episodes, nearly a month of thrice-weekly uploads, for the full party to meet up for the first time. And as there had been 0 deaths and minimal moments of tension in all that time, they decided to implement a mod to make the game harder, a tacit acknowledgement that the season was dragging, that perhaps even they were bored by it. But ultimately, this mattered not, because all of the deaths that would eventually come to pass were still nothing more than easily avoidable mistakes. Jeff died from misusing his weapon's teleportation feature and dropping off a cliff. Barry, the quiet one, died from falling off a staircase, and despite being surrounded by his friends in broad daylight, it took the others 14 seconds to even notice that he had died.
Who died? Someone died!
Was that Barry?
Barry?
Where was
Barry?
he?
That was Barry! What happened to him?
PBG died quite literally of lag, rubber banding and taking fall damage on an elevator. Luca died of falling down a shaft that had opened beneath her, after an NPC had just announced that he would be opening it. And Luke died in the final battle, not realizing that he had equipped his armor in the social slot by mistake. But even with 5 deaths, that still left 3 players to emerge victorious from their final boss. Despite going down as another win, though, something about the season just felt hollow. The editing was excellent as usual, and indeed there were moments of genuine intensity, but it didn't feel as if the cast had struggled, persevered, and then grown as they had in past seasons. There was no toil, there was no triumph, there was just 26 episodes of 8 people stumbling through a difficult-to-follow game. They didn't even end up filming a podcast for this season. It just sort of happened, and then it was over. Nothing lost, nothing gained. You already know this one. We've already sung this song for you. The very same words and the very same melody. Following a string of frustrating seasons, hardcore was in dire need of a change. Either something needed to be done to recapture the magic of old, or they needed to find a better way to truly revitalize the show. Season 7, a return to going after the dragon, managed to do a little bit of both. This season's twist was the use of a voice proximity mod, meaning that the further away anyone ventured from the others in-game, the more distant their voice would become.
The further we are away, the less you can hear us.
They also disabled death messages, meaning that if someone happened to be killed all by their lonesome out of earshot, the rest of the group may never know what became of them. It would be as if they had just up and vanished into the abyss. This was a genuinely nerve-wracking premise, so more than ever it became necessary for the cast to keep each other close. But this season didn't go off without its hitches. First of all, the cast felt the need to self-impose a limit of 3 shields to distribute between the 7 of them, for some reason under the impression that shields were overpowered. Another issue was the ever-encroaching presence of reality. At one point, Dean actually had to leave the recording session to go to work.
Dean went AFK.
Lava again.
Dean went to work.
The first time since Minecraft 1 that anyone's real life actively interfered with the show. This wasn't clearly explained at first, leading many in the audience to assume that the others had just abandoned Dean back at home. And finally, there was the fact that disaster struck just 2 episodes in. The mine they had built into their house was overrun with zombies, cornering Barry underground and Jared within the house itself. Fumbling their escape routes, both were killed, dealing a heavy blow to the team right out of the gate. But still, they managed to recover from the dual loss and get back to work. After all, it's easier to spread 3 shields across 5 people rather than 7. And the shields, indeed, were soon to become their Chekhov's gun. In time, they reached the point in their journey where it became necessary to fight Endermen. Their strategy for this was to stand out in the open, vulnerable from all directions, with 1 shield bearer expected to block every strike from a furious, rapidly teleporting Enderman. This plan crumbled almost immediately, taking both Dean and Luke with it. They tried to save him, tried to save both of them, but they couldn't. The track was laid long before they even began, and by then the train was rolling much too fast to stop it. And doesn't something about this seem just a little bit familiar? Barry, Jared, Dean, someone with a sweet and melodic voice. Already a pattern was emerging, and it would continue to prove itself true. Ray fell next, slain by a wither skeleton's poison. No, it was by falling straight down a 1-block hole into lava. And again, for the 3rd time, Jeff and PBG were alone. As always, the friends, the buddies, the inseparable too. But the 3rd time was meant to be the charm, right? A lot had changed over the years, after all. They were far more experienced. Jeff had already faced the dragon once before, and now he had updated strategies and a helping hand. Now they had a chance. Together, they breached the stronghold, a first for PBG, and it felt different. The odds were still daunting, but something shifted in the air, in their demeanor, and what they believed to be possible. Maybe it would turn out this time. This time, the 2 of them could change the past, seize their fate, and make it their own. This time, the 2 of them could live as long as they stuck together.
You okay? No!
No! Are you kidding me? Austin! Oh no. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me, dude? Oh my god. Not again. Not a repeat. It's not a repeat. It's not a repeat.
Whoever wished to recapture the magic of old did so on a monkey's paw. When Jeff fell through the portal and stood face to face with the dragon, once again all by himself. It wasn't long before he was punted into the sky and shattered upon the ground. We've gone over this. No man can kill a dragon, not by himself. And these scenarios, these downright uncanny tricks of fate, this is where hardcore thrives. When the cast tries so desperately to survive that the world refuses to let them be happy. When they've done all they possibly can, yet still everything is ripped from them in an instant. The show is at its most powerful not when lives are lost by carelessness, or by recklessness, or by insufficiency, or even by game malfunction, but when they do absolutely everything right, and it still doesn't matter. They have to want it more than anything. And you can tell when they do, because they die clawing and kicking and screaming. It's not magic behind hardcore. It's human nature. There is a reason that we allow ourselves to have our hearts broken over and over and over again. No matter how many times we've seen this tale end in tragedy, we can't seem to turn away when they convince us and themselves that maybe it will turn out next time. But next time wouldn't arrive for quite a while. For then, there was a very, very long hiatus. Perhaps this had something to do with how in May of 2019, ProJared had a bit of a widely publicized moment. Perhaps this had something to do with the resulting collapse of normal boots and the introspection forced upon those who were once a part of it. Perhaps this had something to do with the fact that times were tough, that the real world was rearing its ugly head in so many ways at once, and it was all people could do to just keep themselves afloat for the time being. But really, above all, this 2.5-year hiatus was the result of change. These weren't young men anymore, after all. When hardcore first began all those years ago, Barry and JonTron were 22, McJones and Gerard were 24, Dean was 20, and PBG, the name and face of the show, was only 21. Just a cast of little guys, with their little guy personalities and wit to match. But now, those same guys were all pushing 30. They'd grown more serious, more sober, and had started to reevaluate what they really wanted. PBG Gameplay, PBG's second channel that had always been home to hardcore, went completely dark without warning. The last video, uploaded on August 5th, 2019, was a completely normal episode of PB and Jeff, which itself was quietly cancelled after running daily for almost 4 years. Jeff abruptly stopped uploading on his YouTube channel in early 2020, transitioning to Twitch-only content in a move matched by many of his peers, including Barry and Rainer Veyes Jr. Luke got married, was banned from Twitch and unbanned again almost a year later, and has since continued doing music production full-time. Dean privated his Twitch VODs and YouTube videos at some point in 2020 and ceased to exist anywhere outside of Twitter. McJones, bless his little heart, steadily fell off the face of the earth over several years before becoming an Ethernet phone wall plate on Twitter and leaving us with some excellent words to live by. Chad took a more business-focused approach to his career. Luca became a sexy Catholic horse VTuber for some reason. Dodger began her life as a kick-ass mom. They all started moving away from what they had once done, forging their own paths through the forest. And all the while, hardcore sat dormant. As the months turned into years, it slowly gathered dust and cobwebs, and the fandom began to dry out. Where there was once discussion and memes and hype, there was now just a single man, Reddit user DarkKnight522, counting inexorably up towards a hypothetical future, another hardcore season that would hopefully someday come. And then, it did. To say that the next season of Hardcore dropped with no warning would be an understatement. Just a month prior, PBG implemented a bot into his Twitch chat explaining that Hardcore was on indefinite hiatus, an implicit request for people to stop bothering him about it. And yet, the next season was already in the final stages of production. Why they chose to drop it so without fanfare remains a mystery even now. Regardless, what this winding path has at last led us to is Normal Dudes Hardcore. What would have been the 8th season, now rechristened as the first of a brand new series. Plucked from PBG's now inactive gameplay channel, granted a new name and a new cast. From the indefinite hiatus into an undefined future. And now, Normal Dudes was back, retaining PBG, Shane, and Gerard from its previous incarnation, and inaugurating Chad Tronic, Lady Talvik, and Proton John as new recruits. Hardcore was released simultaneously with the announcement of Normal Dudes' revival, acting as the metaphorical complimentary bread rolls, a way of enticing people back to the channel. Normal Dudes Hardcore was presented under the unspoken yet obvious pretense of being somehow different than the hardcore of the four. A pilot all its own, something that attempted to re-establish itself without its then 9 years of history, buried under 6 feet of 90s branding. And that may as well have been true, granted how little those who had previously participated in hardcore seemed to remember of their past experiences. A leap of faith, it was. And so, where did they land? Here's the thing. They forgot to jump. When the spotlight dawned upon the 7 members of Normal Dudes Hardcore, something was immediately wrong. In their haste to recreate the show, composed entirely of the new boots and one boot-in-law, they had perhaps overlooked the relevance of leadership within the cast. After all, every season needs someone to whom others look for guidance, someone steady and dependable, someone to be the glue holding the team together. A hero, perhaps, to believe in. PBG was not suited to fill this role, despite his best efforts.
Never do this. Never do what I just did.
Gerard and John both presumably hadn't played the game in years. Shane was clearly uninterested.
Oh. Looks like they've seen some action.
And Amber had never played at all.
How do I equip an axe? How do I do that? How do I equip an axe?
Okay.
Which left Chad and Luca as the only remaining candidates for that cardboard medal of leadership. Luca, the motherly type, was a bit more eager to fill that role, but her abilities still wouldn't be enough on their own.
Does anyone here really know how to play Minecraft?
We've gone over this. No one is ever enough on their own. But fortunately, Chad was by her side. She was able to act as the morale, the person encouraging the others not to give up, while he offered guidance, being the most proficient in the game itself and the only one familiar with its recent updates.
I found some gold. That's actually kind of helpful, actually. We're gonna need it for the nether.
Together, the two of them could surely make do if it didn't so happen that Chad proceeded to die in episode 7. Killed by a single Enderman in broad daylight, surrounded by his teammates pleading for help. But hearing Luca's warning of friendly fire, the others faltered, afraid of harming one another in blindly rushing into the fray. And this hesitation was just enough to cost Chad his life. But forget the 7th episode. It was already clear how the season was going to unfold by only the 3rd, exemplified in the tragic case of Amber. Consider for a moment Luca. She entered Terraria 3 as an utter novice, yet she survived the entire series Prother through the aid of having someone to properly watch her back. 2 someones, in fact, Team New Kids. And then consider Dodger. She was absolutely beloved by her fellow cast members. After all, they missed her so much after she died that they dragged her back from hell itself. Truly, a newbie is only as good as those who look after her. But Amber wasn't as fortunate as her predecessors. The others did try to teach her the basics. It's clear that they cared and wanted to include her, but they were simply lacking the resources or maybe the patience to truly provide her the care that she needed. And in episode 3, just the 3rd episode of her debut with normal boots, she stumbled into a cave while mining. Stumbled onwards into the dark without knowing what dangers to look out for, or how to protect herself from them, or how to turn logs into planks, or even just how to eat. The very first threat that she encountered, 2 creepers that were seen coming, was also her last. And then the others looked at her corpse and proclaimed her death a freak accident.
That was a pretty freak accident.
It's that moment that stands as the rawest indictment of what Normal Dudes Hardcore had become. The show presented itself as just this new, untethered, formless thing, a concept that had conveniently fallen into their laps. An insignificant pilot, unneeding or maybe undeserving of hype. Or, in other words, perhaps just an obligation. And this is the fear in the back of our minds that saddens us most of all. More than the lack of care for each other that they demonstrated. More than Gerard requiring an intervention from God to learn how basic combat worked.
Thanks to some friendly off-stream advice, I've learned how to attack.
More than PBG almost invoking McJones' name when they came across Netherwart in the Bastion, and even more than him cutting himself off halfway and disregarding the advice he'd recalled.
Maybe we needed him for enchanting in the past. I remember
what did we need that for at all?
No, I think you need him for potions.
No, the idea that the show might have morphed from a passion project by 2 brothers into just a burden, a means to an end, a product beholden to a brand. How awful. How truly awful. Are you having fun? That's all that really matters. By all means, disregard everything we've said if, at the end of the day, you are having fun and doing what you love. But we don't think we're alone in feeling that this season was missing its heart. And that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to hardcore. If its cast began to find it tiresome, a chore, just business and business alone. Something that they can't stop only because they'll never hear the end of it if they do. It's not for us to say how grounded in reality that sentiment truly is, but for a long time there's been this mounting sense of hostility between the cast and the audience. From what happened in MineZ 2 and Minecraft 6, to the frustration elicited by countless harsh comments telling them how to play the game, weeks after the season had already finished recording, to the apparent need to set up an auto-mod message to spare PBG's streaming experience. Something broke somewhere along the way. There's no sense of trust, no communication, no faith in the other. Even now, though it's been a year since Normal Dudes last uploaded, anyone wondering what's going on is immediately treated like a moron, like they're intentionally being annoying or antagonistic, just for genuinely caring. Where have we heard that one before? Perhaps this breakdown in trust originates from the lack of understanding of how genuinely good the show is. The failure to acknowledge that what they have on their hands is something truly special. Perhaps it's a lack of faith in themselves, in their own work. Thinking we're not that smart, we're not that good, we could never create something as special as people keep saying that it is. They must just want us to be content slaves. They're just fucking with us. They didn't win Normal Dudes Hardcore. And that brings us, at last, to the present day. As of writing this, the future of hardcore is unknown. Will there be another season? How soon will it come? Will every member of Normal Boots be returning? Are there plans to feature more than one guest? Will Dean ever be let out of his cage? These questions remain unanswered. But, prithee, let not our critical tone lead you to believe that we hate hardcore, that we spurn the show in its modern form, that we're averse to change and wish for the cast to cave to our demands, for nothing could be further from the truth. We love hardcore, with all of our beings. Hardcore has and continues to mean more to us than we could ever put into words. And all we hope is that the meaning, the impact of hardcore will continue to be preserved, no matter what form it comes to take in the future. We don't want hardcore to fade away into the abyss, or to change form so drastically as to become unrecognizable, at least not without us having a chance to speak our piece. We don't want it to fall the way of McJones, who left in a blur, gone in an instant, a door slamming shut and the lock clicking tight. We never even got to thank him for his time, to tell him how much we, the fans, appreciate him, to give him the gracious send-off that he, the co-creator of the show and one of its longtime members, rightfully deserved. It wouldn't have had to be big or dramatic, but just something. Thank you. We'll miss you. Stop by sometime so we can catch up. That's all it would take. And we don't want to miss the chance to express our gratitude ever again. And so we made this video. On the 10th anniversary of PBG Hardcore, we come to you with our hearts bared. We come to you in a feeble, humble attempt to explain to you everything that this beautiful, horrible, agonizing, wondrous show of yours has done for us. We want you to understand. We need you to understand, so that you don't let everything that is good about it slip through your fingers. First, please know that the cast matters. Hardcore is a player-driven show above all. Yes, it has come to be dramatic and professional and wonderfully edited, but such things are window dressing. The heart of the show comes from those who partake in it, from their personalities and the bonds they forge and their ways of approaching the world. From the genuine, authentic, bare expressions of who they are as human beings. And if you lose sight of that, you lose everything which drives the show. Second, please also keep in mind that the past matters. Remember your roots. Remember where you began. Remember hardcore's origins as just a bunch of friends hanging out, enjoying their time spent together. Remember why you started this show in the first place. Remember why you took the chance to come along for the ride. Remember the wisdom you've gained from players in seasons past. Even if you move on, even if things change, remember that it happened. Remember that you cared. Remember that it mattered to you, too. And finally, understand that you, yourself, matter too. It is you who made this show come into being, and it is you who holds its future in your hands. It is not an accident that the show turned out to be so amazing. It is your efforts that made it what it is today. We, the fans who've fallen in love with the show, haven't done so by chance. We've seen it for what it is, and we adore it. So, proceed carefully, yet boldly, with responsibility, yet with confidence. You've done it before, and you can do it again. If you so choose, you can ensure that hardcore burns on like a candle of hope in the night, like the welcoming hearth that has given us all a home, like the fire of life itself, burning fiercely, boldly, and ever unyielding. To all of you, to Dean Elizab, to Jeff, to Barry, to Todd, to Luke and Luca, to Chad and Dodger, to Shane and Gerard, to To Amber and Ray and Ian and Ross and Paul and John again and Satch and Caddy and Jesse and Jared and Tim and Kyle and Smooth and so on. To PBG and McJones. No, to Austin and Stuart Hargrave. You've all made something truly amazing. Something like nothing there has ever been before or ever will be again. And we humbly ask you not to forget that. The show still has so much potential. So much possibility for growth and change and evolution. So much capability of becoming more. There's so much left to explore if that is what you want, deep down in your hearts. But if it isn't, if what you'd rather do now or ever in the future is let it come to a close, then give it the honor it deserves. Don't think you can just slip out the back door unnoticed, that no one will even realize you've left. Don't think that there isn't anyone who really cares anymore, because there are. We do. The show is everything to us, and it would be a shame to see it die in darkness. So, please, if the curtains are to fall across the stage of hardcore once and for all, at least look it in the eyes and say goodbye before you go. We will always love hardcore. Always. Thank you for everything, and we look forward to the future. Yours truly, The Fates.
Pour the wine and raise a cup. Drink up, brothers, you know how. And spill a drop for Orpheus, wherever he is now. Some birds sing when the sun shines bright. Our praise is not for them, but the ones who sing in the dead of night. We raise our cups to them. Wherever he is wandering, alone upon the earth, let all our singing follow him and bring him comfort. Sunflowers bloom where the green grass grows. Our praise is not for them, but the ones who bloom in the bitter snow. We raise our cups to them. We raise our cups and drink them up. We raise them high and drink them dry to Orpheus and all of us. Good night, brothers. Good night.